What is good, guys? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to break down what's happening to the overall economy thus far, what's happening with the data coming out for tomorrow, what's going on with the Israel situation, and more news about Tesla's causing it to move. But before I break into detail all this information, before I talk about Tesla, SPY, Nvda, and all these different tickers, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Weeble link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Weeble and deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 free stocks. Deposit $25,000 or more, you're guaranteed 75 free stocks. And all friends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to the markets. Looking at Tesla and the overall market, we saw some interesting volatility today after Jerome Powell gave his speech. And what Jerome Powell said was very, very different from before, as he has a very, very different view and very, very different perspective and tone amidst what's happening around the world. Looking at Tesla, we had a very, very nice range today. We were trying to hold above 155 for the majority of the day. There was one instance where we dropped a little bit below that before coming back up. That could possibly be another liquidity grab, another trigger of stops before some buyers stepped in. And then for Tesla, we managed to close above 157, which is a decent sign. So there is potential for Tesla to try to rebound a little bit before we see more potential downside maybe later on. So I want to break down more details about the charts on Tesla, SPY, and the others. Ultimately, guys, I do think there's more downside coming to the markets later on. But before that happens, there could be a small bounce coming. I want to break down why I think that's a possibility and some factors about that and other things as well. But let me first talk about the news and things like that. So, the reason why the market likely has more downside coming is because of this whole situation between Israel and Iran. Let me just say that right now, I'm not really going to give you guys like a history lesson or go over anything or kind of pick any sides. I just want to say that Iran launched a retaliatory attack against Israel over the weekend, launching over 300 drones and very important missiles. Israel managed to intercept almost everything, 99% of them. And after that happened, Israel is now saying that it wants to retaliate against Iran. So this is very serious because Israel's war cabinet and their chief of defense are all coming out together, and they're essentially saying the same things that they want to attack Iran now. They want to kind of respond to what just happened. And once again, guys, I'm not saying anyone's the aggressor or anything like that. I just want to say that that's what's happening right now, and that's all that's important. I'm not worried about like the full history or anything like that. I just want to focus on the current events. And the current event is not the best for the markets. The situation is still very tense. It's not easing off a bit, and it's still very, very important. So remember that once again, you guys have the right to say whatever you want about this in the comments. I'm not deleting comments or blocking people or doing anything like that. I only delete comments if there's profanity or things like that. Otherwise, I don't really do that. I noticed that YouTube also has the ability to monitor the comments. So I don't know what's been happening to some people saying that their comments are not showing. So I contacted YouTube about that. Hopefully the issue gets fixed. And with that being said, you guys are free to argue as much as you want about this or say whatever you want to say in the comments. I respect your freedom of speech, and I'm not going to delete any unnecessary comments or do it unnecessarily is what I'm trying to say. All right. Anyways, going back to this, this is very important. This is still very tense. The situation has not eased and it's still a little bit more bearish for the markets overall. So we'll see how that news affects us for now. In terms of data, there's not really a whole lot coming out so far. I just want to mention that we have the 17-week bill auction coming out at 11:30 a.m. We have the 20-year bond auction at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and at 2 p.m. we have the Fed Beige Book. Now, the Beige Book, is another very important economic report about the current state of the economy. That's going to be important, might cause some volatility. So watch for volatility at these times tomorrow. And besides that, we just have a couple of Fed speakers after the market closes. Everything else is very, very minor. Now, for a couple of things coming out, I just want to mention that we had some earnings that came out in the morning. I went over all of these already, but just to recap, Bank of America did relatively well, beating on EPS and revenue, decent net income, but their overall deposits weren't as great as before. But I would say they still did relatively well as the share price went up. Morgan Stanley was also one of the big ones for today. They did relatively well, beating on pretty much everything EPS and revenue. We saw a nice net income, good profitability, good growth, and overall the share price is up quite nicely because of good guidance. So Morgan Stanley did relatively well. For tomorrow, we have ASML. We also have US Bancorp, and we also have like Discover and a few others. For earnings that just came out, we just had United announce its earnings, and this was decent overall with some negative things, but still pretty good as the share price is up. So they slashed their 2024 aircraft delivery plan as the Boeing crisis is leading to delays. But despite that, it's not really affecting their earnings and projections as much, which is why the share price is up. Why is that? Because when you look at this, They have just about 61 new narrow body planes this year. That's down from what we saw previously, and their overall delivery expectations are a little bit lower because of what's happening with Boeing. However, despite that, their loss per share was only 15 cents. That is not as bad as what was expected. A loss of 57 cents was expected. It's not bad. The revenue is 12.54 billion. That is above expectations, and everything else has been quite decent. They also have earnings expected to be between 3.75 and 4.25. I'm sorry, $4.25 in the second quarter. That is above expectations. They also have a good forecast of between $9 and $11 a share. That is above expectations as well. So good guidance, decent earnings overall, and because guidance is still decent, the share price is up, despite the fact that they're slashing their overall delivery plan. So not bad for them. For the overall markets right now, we're kind of fearful in terms of our sentiment right now. We're seeing market momentum kind of dipping a little bit back down to neutral, getting closer to the 125-day moving average for SPY or the S&P 500. Simultaneously, we have the put and call positioning reaching extreme fear. We're starting to see more fear emerging from the markets. Market volatility is also going up to more fear as we're seeing it breaking through the 50 daily, moving average. And then besides that, the market's becoming a lot more fearful, and we're going to be looking at different factors affecting it. I'm going to be looking at the price of a barrel of oil if this starts to skyrocket. If Israel does end up launching an attack in response to Iran, this could also start to go up. That's going to be very important. We're waiting for that to happen. If that happens, it's projected that this could go all the way up to $100 a barrel or higher, which is going to be a little bit more inflationary for the markets. So we'll be watching to see if that happens. And also, don't forget that there's going to be a response from the US. If the US starts printing more money, doing things like that, it could also affect things. So we'll just wait and see. For Tesla, we had some negative news come out. Tesla is going to be reducing its entire entire workforce by 10%. Not the best of news. This is happening because of the fact that there's been a decline in sales and there are other things happening. But it's not just their employees that are working on like the production lines that are getting laid off. Also, two of their top executives, Drew Baglino and also Rohan Patel, are going to be leaving the company, which is not the best of news for them. This is part of why Tesla underperformed in the morning. There's been more talk about different departments losing 20% of their workforce. That is a little bit negative for Tesla, and we're seeing some more headlines about that. That's part of why Tesla dropped a little bit more today before it tried to rebound. So that's why Tesla is dipping a little bit more. This is not the best of news. And there's been some talk from employees saying that some of their best employees are being laid off, and it could really negatively affect the company. With that happening, it is what it is. It's very sad, but Tesla has to do what's necessary. And with that happening, I believe that Tesla and the other employees all have to kind of like improve. They all have to find different ways to either find new jobs or improve in any other ways. So I just wish the best for Tesla. They're going through some hard times right now amidst what's happening in the economy. And also, I wish the best for the employees who are losing their jobs. It's very horrible for that to happen to anyone. It's very, very difficult, but it is what it is. Tesla has to improve, and so do every single one of these people. There's always room for improvement, always room for them to find new jobs elsewhere. For more news coming out, Wells Fargo is maintaining its underweight rating. That's something else that's very, very important and worth noting. And also, Citigroup is maintaining a neutral rating. There's also news coming out right here that the price price ratio is dipping just a little bit more. That's showing that Tesla is not as strong as what it was like before. Wednesdays tend to be green only about 48% of the time. And we tend to see more volatility at 10 o'clock a.m., 11 a.m., and then during the final hour of the trading day. Besides that, I'm not seeing anything else too crazy so far. I did mention in my other videos that there were Cybertruck delays. I went over all of that already. That's happening because of an accelerator pad issue that they were having. So that's something Tesla's working on with the Cybertruck delays and also all of this. But Tesla's trying to price in a lot of this. 97 million was the volume. We're getting a good volume despite the fact that Tesla's dipping. And we're going to be looking to see what's happening with the short volume as that's decreasing for now. So now the question is, what's going to happen to Tesla? How is Tesla going to move from here? What is my personal opinion on this matter? I want to break down more details about the charts from this point on. So I just want to note that when you zoom out of the charts, okay, we're going to first do a nice little zoom out. It's going on to the daily time frames for Tesla SPY and the QQQ. We zoom out like this, go down, and you could see way back here, Tesla has this gap all the way down close to about the 144 to 146 area. There's this gap down here, which Tesla could fill all the way down to 144. And I do see Tesla likely filling that gap soon because the chart is bearish overall. It's been making lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, at least on the daily time frame. So yes, I think Tesla might come down to fill that gap, but it might not just fill that gap straight down from here. We might not just collapse to 144. Looking at the daily chart, there is a possibility we might come up to fill this gap, try to rebound a little bit, make our way back up to 160, shuffle in the low 160s one more time, and then eventually make our way down lower. That's a strong possibility. And we have very similar setups on SPY and also on the QQQ. On SPY, okay, we have this gap. I think we might fill this gap down to 497. We might rebound first and then end up filling it, or we could just drop from here, losing support around 502 and then come down to fill that gap. I think we're going to fill the gap. I just don't know if we're going to go straight down or if we're going to rebound first and then do it. I'll give you guys more details about that in just a few minutes, but that's what the daily chart is showing. For the QQQ, it's the same thing. We have this gap to fill down here at 425. If we lose support at 430, we could end up filling this gap all the way down here at 425. However, it's also possible that the QQQ is forming a potential reversal structure. We might get a little rebound first, retest some support, becoming resistance before we make our way lower, because we dropped quite a bit. We dropped quite a bit on SPY and the QQQ already. There could be a rebound coming first before we end up coming down to fill the gap, or we could just fill the gap straight down. I'll give you guys more details in just a few minutes. All right, so I want to give you guys just like a very good overview of the overall market on the hourly time frame and also the daily time frame I just showed you. So on the hourly, you guys can see Tesla is starting to show some life. Same thing on the 4-hour time frame. And it looks like it might try to rebound. We're getting some signals that suggest that. It really depends on the levels. If Tesla holds above 157.8, we're going to be looking for a move for 158, then 160. And if that breaks, look for 162.5 all the way up here. If we lose support at 155, if that fails us, we're going to be coming all the way down towards 152 all over again if we lose 155, in my opinion. What do I think is going to happen? In my opinion, Tesla will likely see more downside, but we might see a little pop first before that ends up happening. I think that's a strong possibility. If Tesla starts pushing up tomorrow, as long as there's no major bad news, and as long as this whole situation involving Israel and Iran does not escalate a lot more, if there's no like new attack, it's possible the market might rebound just a little bit before we see more possible downside later on. If Tesla holds above 157, look for a push all the way up to this resistance. And I think there's a chance we could be pushing back up to 160 or very low 160s temporarily before we make our way down lower later on. So look for a little pop tomorrow is the most likely possibility. But if we lose 155, I would turn back to bearish. We're not really there yet. So I think that this drop right here is a possible liquidity grab, and they're trying to trigger stops. And now we might see a little rebound, a very temporary rebound before we make our way back down. So I think that we might try to come up to fill this gap if we manage to hold, above our resistance. So I think that Tesla has potential to do so, and we'll just have to see how it goes from there. So I think I'd be watching the 20 EMA. We might see a little attempt to go higher if we do end up filling this gap, and then we could drop later on. If we lose 155, I turn bearish, but that's what I'm seeing, at least for Tesla for now, as a little rebound is the most likely possibility. For SPY, notice that we have a range and we're also trying to base at 503. If we lose 502.5 to 503, I'm going to be looking for a move back down to 500 and 497 to fill the big gap. If we end up breaking past 506, we could be looking for a rebound move to 508 to 510 first before we ultimately come down to fill the gap at 497. Okay, so what do I think might end up happening? I have a feeling that we might see a little rebound because we've dropped 20 points on SPY. We were just at 521 a few days ago. Now we're all the way down at like 522. It's almost 20 points. We saw 522 today, 502 today. So I think we might try to see an attempt in this range. Whichever way we break in the range will determine what the bigger move is. But I have a feeling we might end up breaking a little bit to the upside and pushing towards this 510 area. I have a feeling we might end up doing that. We might push a little bit higher towards this 508 to 510 area first before we end up breaking down. If we break 506, so I find that as a strong possibility. There might be a little rebound first before we end up breaking down all the way down towards our 497 gap fill. So that's what I find to be a very, very probable if we manage to break this resistance. But just to be safe, watch your range. See if SPY loses 503 or not, or if we break through 506. I think that we might try to break higher before we see a move to the downside. That's a real possibility, but just watch it to be safe. On the QQQ, it's already starting to bounce a little bit. Notice how we hit this 429 area, and since then we pushed all the way up to about 433, then we came back down. If we continue to break past the high of the day today, I'm going to be looking for a test of about 435 to 436. We have important EMAs there on different time frames. Also, we have a confluence of resistance right there because that's where our previous support becoming resistance happens to align, 435 to 436. So I think there could be an attempt to get all the way back up here, this 436 zone, and then we could reject and start dipping down lower later on. I think the QQQ is going to fill the gap to 425. I still believe that, but I think we might rebound first before that happens. If we lose 429 instead, then yes, we could just go straight down to 425. But I think that this chart is showing some life that it wants to bounce. We have a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. It's also trying to rebound a little bit. If we break this resistance, look for a push all the way up towards 436 before we end up coming back down. I find that to be a big possibility. For Nvidia has a very, very nice looking structure that's developing here. I want to note that Nvidia has a gap to fill in the 820s. We also are going to likely come down to 834 soon. But before that happens, we might see another attempt to rebound. I know Nvidia has this downtrend right here. We had this high here. We came down. We had a lower high, came down. Might push a little higher towards 885 to 892. Go a little bit higher if we break above our 200 EMA. Get very close to 892 to 900. A little bit higher. And then we could get a rejection back down towards 844, if not 834. I find that to be a strong possibility as well. So watch resistance at 881. If Nvidia breaks this, look for a little bit more of a push before we drop lower. That's going to be very, very key. Apple dropped very hard after bearish news came out, but noticed on the 1 hour is trying to turn over. There could be a test of 171 coming if we break higher. And if that breaks, look for 172 and 172.5. If it goes all the way up to the 171 to 172 area, we could get a rejection and then end up dropping lower. We have this imbalance as well to fill. If we do the opposite, if we end up losing 168.3, we could be dropping all the way down to 166. My gut is telling me that this might rebound just a little bit, get close to 171, and then continue to respect the downtrend, maybe get a little rebound first before we continue lower. So I still find that to be a big possibility. Another big factor and another thing worth noting is the bullish news that came out for Supermicro. This is trying to rebound, and I see the potential for this to go higher. So I want to now focus on the other tickers I typically go over just for more clarity. So I'm seeing a potential imbalance fill that's kind of forming right now. This is as we approach our resistance at this is just at about 1020. So it could push a little bit higher to 1000 to 1020 and then reject back down towards 940. So watch for that very carefully. On Rivian, we're dropping really, really hard, but it's trying to rebound a bit. On the 4 hour, we could be looking for a test of 9.2 before we end up dropping lower. So watch for that very, very carefully. That's going to be very, very key. So look for a test of 9 to 9.2 before we end up rejecting. On SoFi could be pushing up towards 7.34 to 7.4 and then reject back down. So watch for that as well. We have a nice head and shoulders like structure, but it is going to try to rebound a bit. I think we might test 7.4, then come back down based off technical analysis. The IWM Russell 2000, this is still very weak. It could try to make its way up to 198 and then reject back down. Still on a very, very big downtrend. We could get a small little bounce before we continue lower. That's a strong possibility as well. For AMD, we're going to likely test at least 165. It could go a little higher than that before it comes back down lower. So I see a little bit of potential for it. For ARM, I'm going to be looking for a test of 124.9. The 124s could be tested before it comes back down. So watch for that. On Coinbase, it's already trying to bounce right here. If we manage to hold above 220, the 200 EMA, I'm going to be looking for a test of about 236 to 240. It could be retesting 236, then rejecting again, but I still see potential for it to try to get a little bounce attempt. On Amazon, we're kind of flat right now, very, very indecisive. We're stuck between 184.5 as resistance. We have support at 182.5 to 183. Might shuffle a little bit longer. If we do hit 185, we could rebound first. If we lose our support right here, we could start dipping lower as we have this gap to fill down here at 180. Might rebound first and then end up dropping or even drop from here. So just give it some time. For Meta has resistance right now at 505. If we break this, look for 509. If we lose support right now around 496, we're going to be coming all the way down towards 490. So it might rebound a little bit first and then drop, but I need to see confirmation first. It is trying to base at the support I marked yesterday, so we'll have to see if that ends up being the case. We'll see if we get a little bounce first before it continues. Just wait for that. This one's a little bit less decisive. I'm seeing signs that Microsoft's trying to hold above its 200 EMA at 413.5. If we hold this, we could be trying to make our way up to about this resistance up here at 418. This is where the previous support becoming resistance happens to be. Could rebound a bit here and then reject, or it could just lose support from here. So we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. For Google, we could retest 157.43 and then reject. I'm seeing some potential for that. If we lose 155.8, we're going to be sinking even lower all the way down here. I think 153 is coming, but we might rebound first before we end up dropping. So we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. For the VIX is nearing a bearish cross in the PPO. If we end up getting that, I'm going to be looking for a test of 17.44. If that fails, let's look for 16.18. Why is this important? Because the VIX is showing some signals that might actually dip a little bit. I need confirmation first to see if it loses 17.44, of course, but I'm seeing some signals that suggest that. This means there's a possible bounce coming to SPY just temporarily to the S&P 500. That could just be very temporary before we end up getting a rejection. So we'll see if that ends up happening to the VIX. For the 10-year Treasury yield, this is also kind of pushing higher, but we're seeing some wicks developing as we're hitting resistance at 4.7. If this rejects and we come down to fill this gap, there's a big gap to fill at 4.5, which aligns with our 20 EMA right now. If this comes down a little bit before it tries to bounce again, this could suggest the market may try to bounce temporarily. And finally, we also have the dollar index, which is currently at 106.5. We're at resistance right now. We'll see how this rejects. If this ends up rejecting here, we could retest 105.96 and then bounce, or we could end up just breaking through this. I'm seeing some tough resistance, but I'm not seeing sign of rejection yet, so I'm going to wait for the dollar. So ultimately, guys, I'm bearish on the markets. I think that there's more downside coming to the QQQ, SPY, Tesla, and etc. But we might get a temporary rebound first before we see more downsides. It's a very, very strong possibility because we dropped very hard in just a couple of days. Last week on Friday, SPY was already in like very close to 520. We were all the way down to about 500 already, 502, like around that range. So we could rebound a bit and then drop lower later on. We'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. I'm going to be very patient nonetheless with the way this ends up moving. All right. So with that being said, I just want to thank you all so much for listening. As far as Tesla goes, Tesla is showing some signs on the 4-hour that wants to rebound. We need some confirmation, of course, but I could see this thing try to get back to fill its gap at this 160 area. We need some news. We have to see what happens tomorrow just to be safe. So I'll be back tomorrow in the morning before the market opens to give you guys another update. So we'll see how things go then. With that being said, thank you for listening. I'll see you guys very soon in just less than 24 hours. By the time the market opens tomorrow, I'll be back. See you guys soon. Take care and have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Thank you. Tesla to the moon because the long term is very bright, and peace out.